A millionaire, devastated by his daughter's terminal diagnosis, begins to live in the shadow of despair. Until one day, he comes home early and catches the maid doing something unexpected next to the child. What he sees leaves him in shock. The Millionaire's Daughter. Chapter 1. The Diagnosis. Robert Blackwood stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the Manhattan skyline as the sun began its descent. 50 floors below, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the world crumbling around him. His phone vibrated for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Another call from his executive team about the merger that would solidify Blackwood Enterprises as the leading tech development company on the East Coast. He ignored it. For 20 years, Robert had built his empire from nothing, a relentless climb from a small apartment in Queens to the pinnacle of New York's financial elite. At 45, he controlled billions in assets, employed thousands, and was featured regularly in Fortune and Forbes. His face, stern, composed, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to calculate profit margins at a glance, had graced enough magazine covers that strangers sometimes recognized him on the street. None of it mattered now. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Dr. Reynolds is calling again. He says it's urgent." Robert closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. "Tell him I'll call back within the hour." He couldn't face another conversation filled with medical jargon that all led to the same devastating conclusion. For 2 months, he had consulted the finest specialists money could buy. Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, Sloan Kettering, even flying in experts from Switzerland and Japan. They all delivered variations of the same verdict. His 5-year-old daughter, Lily, had an aggressive form of brain cancer, rare, inoperable, terminal. The most optimistic prognosis gave her 6 months. Robert's phone buzzed again with a text from his ex-wife Victoria, who had primary custody. "She's asking for you." He grabbed his coat and left without a word to his staff. 30 minutes later, his driver pulled up to Victoria's Upper East Side brownstone. Despite their bitter divorce 3 years earlier, they had maintained a civil relationship for Lily's sake. Now their shared tragedy had erased old resentments. Victoria met him at the door, her perfect features strained with exhaustion. "She's been asking when you'd come all day," she whispered. "The new medication makes her tired, but she fought to stay awake for you." Robert nodded, unable to speak as he climbed the stairs to Lily's room. The hallway was lined with framed photos documenting her short life. Lily as a newborn, Lily taking her first steps, Lily on her first day of preschool. Each image stabbed at him with what they were about to lose. He paused outside her door, drawing a deep breath to compose himself. When he entered, Lily was propped up in bed, surrounded by stuffed animals. Her previously golden curls now thin and dull against the pillows. Yet her smile, that precious smile that had melted his heart from the moment she was born, still lit up her face when she saw him. "Daddy, you came." She reached out her thin arms. "Of course I did, Princess." He sat beside her, gathering her gently into a hug. "I'm sorry I'm late. Work was busy. That's okay. Miss Clara made me feel better." Lily pointed to the corner where a woman was quietly organizing a tray of medications. Clara Wilson straightened up, nodding respectfully. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood." Robert barely acknowledged her, just another in the rotating staff of nurses and housekeepers Victoria employed. In his world, such people were essentially invisible, necessary but unremarkable parts of maintaining a household. "She sang me songs and told me stories about magic doctors," Lily continued, her voice growing drowsy from the medication. "She says sometimes doctors don't know everything." Robert shot a sharp look at Clara, who quickly averted her eyes. "I'll let you two have some time," Clara murmured, slipping from the room. Once she was gone, Robert turned his attention back to his daughter, reading her favorite story until she drifted to sleep. He sat watching her breathe, memorizing every feature of her face. Victoria appeared in the doorway. "The night nurse will be here soon. Are you staying?" "I have calls to make. I'm working on getting her into that experimental program at Stanford." "Robert," Victoria's voice broke, "we need to start thinking about—" "Don't," his voice was ice. "I'll call you tomorrow." Downstairs, he was surprised to find Clara in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an herbal tea. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, with warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Not beautiful in the conventional sense of the women who typically surrounded him, but there was something striking in the quiet confidence of her movements. "You should be more careful what you say to Lily," he said coldly. "False hope is cruel." Clara looked up, her expression neither intimidated nor apologetic. "I don't believe in false hope, Mr. Blackwood, only in possibilities beyond what we immediately see. And you're qualified to make that assessment. How, exactly?" "Medical degree I don't know about." "No," she replied calmly. "But my brother was diagnosed with a similar condition when we were children. The doctors gave him 3 months. That was 25 years ago." Robert paused. And he's still alive. A doctor in Vermont treated him, one who uses methods the medical establishment rejects." She hesitated. "I've worked for 5 families with children facing terminal diagnoses. I've seen what conventional medicine can and cannot do." "You're just the housekeeper," Robert said dismissively, though something in her words had caught hold of his desperate heart. "I'm a certified nursing assistant who specializes in pediatric palliative care," she corrected gently. "Mrs. Blackwood hired me specifically because of my experience with children like Lily." "Well, keep your miracle stories to yourself. Lily needs science, not fairy tales." Clara nodded, but as Robert turned to leave, she spoke again. "Mr. Blackwood, the tea I'm making, it's part of the protocol that helped my brother. It won't harm Lily, but it might ease her nausea from the radiation treatments. Would you like me to stop?" Robert should have said yes, should have fired her on the spot for overstepping. Instead, he found himself hesitating, studying this woman who dared challenge him. "Does Victoria know?" "Yes, she authorized me to try complementary approaches alongside Lily's medical treatment." "Fine," he finally said. "But if anything happens, you'll hold me personally responsible." "I understand." She returned to her work, seemingly unperturbed by the implicit threat. As Robert left the brownstone, his driver waited by the car. "Home, sir?" "No, take me back to the office." He spent the night surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, drowning himself in work that suddenly seemed meaningless. Around 3 a.m., he found himself Googling alternative cancer treatments, medical miracles, and finally, Vermont Doctor Unorthodox Methods Cancer. The results were a mixed bag of scientific skepticism, desperate testimonials, and warnings about charlatans preying on vulnerable families. Nothing concrete about the doctor Clara had mentioned. By morning, exhaustion and desperation had worn down his resistance. He called Victoria. "The housekeeper, Clara. What do you know about her?" "She's been amazing with Lily. Why?" "I need her number." 2 hours later, Clara sat across from him in his office, composed despite the opulence surrounding her. "Dr. Thomas Griffin," she said, sliding a piece of paper across his desk. "He lives in a remote area of Vermont now, after leaving his practice at Mass General 15 years ago." "Why did he leave?" "His methods became too controversial. He believes cancer treatment requires healing the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. He developed protocols combining plant-based compounds, nutrition therapy, and psychological techniques that showed promising results, especially in children. But when he refused to separate his treatments for clinical trials, claiming they only worked in combination, he was marginalized." "This sounds like pseudoscience," Robert said, though he couldn't quite dismiss the hope rising in his chest. "Maybe." Clara met his gaze steadily. "But I watched my brother recover when everyone said it was impossible. I've seen other children respond when conventional treatments failed. Why are you telling me this? You barely know me or my daughter." Clara's expression softened. "Because every child deserves a chance, Mr. Blackwood, even when science says there isn't one." Robert stared at the name on the paper, weighing his options. He had built his fortune on calculated risks, on seeing opportunities others missed. "He won't see you because you're wealthy or powerful," Clara added. "He only takes patients he believes he can help, and only if the parents are willing to participate fully in the healing process." "Meaning what?" "Meaning you can't just write a check and expect results. His methods require complete commitment from the family." Robert laughed bitterly. "So in addition to being a quack, he's also a sanctimonious one." "He saved my brother's life when no one else could," Clara replied simply. "I thought you should know he exists. What you do with that information is up to you." After she left, Robert sat motionless for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called his head of security. "I need everything you can find on a Dr. Thomas Griffin, formerly of Massachusetts General Hospital, now somewhere in Vermont. Medical background, current location, allegations, lawsuits, patient outcomes, gone everything. And I need it yesterday." That night, as he sat beside Lily's bed watching her sleep, her breathing labored and her small body curled in pain despite the medications, Robert made his decision. Science had failed them. What did they have to lose? "Clara," he called softly, knowing she was nearby. "That doctor of yours, how soon can you arrange a meeting?" Chapter 2. The Journey. 2 weeks later, Robert sat in his customized Range Rover, staring at the GPS as it guided them deeper into Vermont's Green Mountains. Beside him, Clara navigated with occasional directions that contradicted the electronic voice. "Turn right at the next unmarked road," she said, glancing down at a hand-drawn map. "The GPS won't recognize it." In the back seat, Lily slept peacefully, a blanket tucked around her thin frame. The private jet flight from New York to Burlington had exhausted her. Even with the medical team Robert had insisted accompany them. Against Clara's advice, he'd brought Lily's oncologist, a young doctor named Nathan Reed, who had been the only specialist willing to even consider unorthodox approaches. "Are you sure this isn't a wild goose chase?" Dr. Reed asked from the third row of seats, his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "Her condition isn't stable enough for experimental treatments." "Her condition isn't responding to conventional treatments," Robert replied tersely. "You said yourself the tumor hasn't shrunk despite 2 rounds of radiation." The landscape outside had transformed from manicured New England towns to increasingly remote forest. Cell service had disappeared an hour ago, making Robert increasingly uneasy. A man accustomed to constant connectivity, he felt naked without the electronic tether to his empire. "We're almost there," Clara reassured them, sensing his discomfort. "Dr. Griffin prefers isolation, says it keeps the energy pure." Robert exchanged skeptical glances with Dr. Reed. He had nearly cancelled this trip a dozen times in the past 2 weeks. The dossier his security team compiled on Dr. Griffin painted a contradictory picture. Brilliant oncologist with groundbreaking research at Harvard Medical School, followed by increasingly unorthodox methodologies, conflict with pharmaceutical companies, and eventual retreat from mainstream medicine. No formal complaints or malpractice suits, but no peer-reviewed publications in over a decade either. What had convinced Robert to proceed was the testimonials. 15 families who claimed Griffin had cured their children when conventional medicine had failed. His investigators had verified 12 of these cases, including Clara's brother, now a healthy software engineer in Seattle. There, Clara pointed to a barely visible dirt road cutting through dense forest. "That's the entrance to his property." Robert turned onto the rough track, the luxury vehicle bouncing uncomfortably. After a mile of dense woods, they emerged into a clearing where a modest wood and stone house stood surrounded by extensive gardens. Solar panels covered the south-facing roof, and a small stream ran alongside the property. A tall, white-haired man emerged from the house as they pulled up. He wore simple linen clothing and looked more like a retired professor than a medical doctor. His piercing grey eyes assessed them coolly as they exited the vehicle. "Clara," he nodded in greeting. "It's been too long." "Dr. Griffin," she smiled warmly. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." "I agreed to meet the child," he corrected, his gaze shifting to Robert with unmistakable distaste. "I made no promises beyond that." Robert stiffened. Accustomed to deference everywhere he went, Griffin's obvious disdain triggered his defenses. Before he could respond, Lily stirred in the back seat. "Where are we?" Her voice, thin but curious, diffused the tension. Clara opened the door and helped her out. Despite the weakness from her treatments, Lily's eyes widened with interest as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Is this where the magic doctor lives?" she asked, looking up at Dr. Griffin without fear. Something in the old doctor's expression softened as he knelt to her level. "There's no magic here, young lady. Just different ways of helping our bodies remember how to heal themselves. I'm Lily," she said, extending her hand with the formal politeness Victoria had instilled in her. "I'm sick, but Daddy and Miss Clara are trying to help me get better." Griffin took her small hand in his weathered one. "I'm Thomas. Would you like to see my garden while the grown-ups talk?" Lily nodded eagerly, and to Robert's surprise, the doctor led her away without seeking his permission. Clara followed, leaving Robert and Dr. Reed standing awkwardly by the vehicle. "This is highly irregular," Reed muttered. "We don't even know what's in those gardens. Some plants can interfere with her current medications." "Let's find out then," Robert said, striding after them. They found Dr. Griffin showing Lily different herbs, explaining their properties in simple terms she could understand. She seemed more animated than Robert had seen her in weeks, reaching out to touch leaves and smell flowers with genuine curiosity. "These plants contain compounds that help the body fight invaders," Griffin was explaining. "Like little soldiers that protect you from the inside." "Like my medicine?" Lily asked. "Different from your medicine. Your medicine attacks both the sick cells and the healthy ones. These plants help the healthy cells grow stronger so they can fight back themselves." Dr. Reed cleared his throat. "That's an oversimplification that could mislead. Children understand more than we credit them for," Griffin interrupted, rising to his full height. His expression cooled as he regarded the younger doctor. "You must be the oncologist who's been poisoning this child in the name of science." Reed bristled. "Chemotherapy and radiation are scientifically validated treatments that have saved countless lives and failed countless others," Griffin countered, "including this child, from what I understand." "Gentlemen," Clara intervened, "perhaps we should continue this inside. Lily needs to rest, and we've come a long way to consult with you, Dr. Griffin." The old doctor nodded curtly and led them toward the house. Inside, the space was surprisingly modern, clean lines and natural materials, with large windows overlooking the gardens. One room was clearly set up as a medical office, with equipment Robert didn't recognize, alongside more familiar monitoring devices. "Lily, would you like to rest while I speak with your father?" Griffin asked gently. Clara took her to a small bedroom while the men gathered in what served as both living room and consultation space. "Let me be clear," Griffin began without preamble. "I don't typically treat children of wealth. Money creates barriers to the kind of commitment my protocol requires. My wealth has nothing to do with my daughter's cancer," Robert replied coldly. "And I'll make any commitment necessary if it means saving her life. Will you?" Griffin studied him with uncomfortable intensity. "My approach requires the primary caregiver, which would be you, Mr. Blackwood, to participate fully in the healing process. That means living here, following strict nutritional guidelines, learning therapeutic techniques, and most importantly, prioritizing emotional connection over all else." "Living here?" Robert repeated incredulously. "That's impossible. I run a multinational corporation. I can't just disappear into the woods. Then I can't help your daughter." Griffin turned to Dr. Reed. "And I won't treat her if she continues the conventional protocols. They work against everything I would implement." Reed stood up angrily. "You're asking a desperate father to abandon proven medical science for what amounts to folk remedies and wishful thinking. That's unconscionable. I'm asking a father to choose between his daughter's life and his business interests," Griffin corrected. "And there's nothing proven about treatments that are failing her." Robert felt trapped between two opposing forces, neither offering a clear path forward. "What exactly is your treatment protocol?" "A comprehensive approach addressing physical, emotional, and environmental factors. Plant-based compounds I've developed over 20 years of research. Nutritional therapy to rebuild her immune system. Gentle physical therapies, and perhaps most importantly, dedicated time with the people who love her. Cancer thrives in stressed bodies and isolated spirits, Mr. Blackwood. My most effective medicine is the healing presence of a fully engaged parent." "And your success rate?" Robert pressed. 73% of patients show significant improvement within 3 months. 62% achieve complete remission within a year. Dr. Reed scoffed. "Without controlled studies, those numbers are meaningless." "They're not meaningless to the children who survived," Clara said quietly, returning from settling Lily. "My brother was given weeks to live. That was 25 years ago." Robert closed his eyes, weighing impossible choices. Abandon his company at a crucial merger period to pursue an unproven treatment, or continue with conventional approaches that specialists worldwide agreed were failing. "How long?" he finally asked. "How long would we need to stay?" "Minimum of 3 months for the initial protocol," Griffin answered. with regular assessments to determine next steps. And if I delegate my business responsibilities but travel back for essential meetings? Impossible. The protocol requires absolute consistency and your complete presence. One day of disruption can undo a week of progress. The demands were absurd, untenable for someone in Robert's position. Yet, as he opened his mouth to refuse, Lily's laugh drifted from the bedroom, a sound so rare in recent months that it caught in his throat. "There's a third option," Clara suggested hesitantly. "Dr. Griffin, what if I stay here with Lily and Mr. Blackwood visits as often as possible while transitioning his business responsibilities? I'm familiar with your protocols from my brother's treatment." The old doctor considered this, not ideal but possible as a transitional arrangement. If Mr. Blackwood commits to being here at least 4 days a week initially, gradually increasing his presence. Robert looked between them, feeling manipulated, yet desperate enough to consider it. "I need to make some calls." "No cell service," Griffin reminded him. "There's a landline in the office you can use, but I'll need your decision today. Lily's condition won't wait for corporate deliberations." Left alone in the office, Robert stared at the ancient desk phone, weighing 20 years of single-minded ambition against his daughter's fading chance at life. He'd built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing, sacrificing 2 marriages and countless relationships on the altar of success. The upcoming merger represented the culmination of that journey, a $4.2 billion deal that would cement his legacy. And none of it would matter if Lily was gone. With shaking hands, he dialed his CFO. "James, it's me. I need you to take over operations for the foreseeable future. Family emergency." The protests on the other end were exactly what he expected. Concerns about investor confidence, the merger timeline, regulatory approvals hanging in the balance. "The contingency plans we established last quarter will apply," Robert interrupted. "You have full signatory authority and the board's backing. I'll join video conferences when possible, but effective immediately. You're acting CEO." He hung up before James could respond, already dialing his personal attorney to set the legal mechanisms in motion. By the time he rejoined the others, something had shifted inside him, terror and resolution in equal measure. 3 months, he told Dr. Griffin. "I'll stay 3 months with minimal remote work, but I need weekly documented assessments of Lily's progress, and if there's no improvement after 1 month, we reevaluate." Griffin nodded solemnly. "Fair terms. We begin tomorrow. Tonight, spend time with your daughter. Read to her. Hold her hand. Remember why you're here." As Clara showed Dr. Reed to the guest room where he would spend the night before returning to New York, Robert went to check on Lily. She lay sleeping peacefully, her cheeks showing the faintest hint of color that had been absent for weeks. Beside her bed sat a small wooden chair, as if placed there specifically for a parent's vigil. Robert lowered himself into it, his designer suit incongruous in the simple room. "I don't know if this is right," he whispered to his sleeping daughter, "but I promise I'll stay as long as you need me." For the first time in years, Robert Blackwood had made a business decision based entirely on love. Chapter 3: New Beginnings. The first week at Dr. Griffin's remote compound tested Robert's patience and pride in ways he hadn't experienced since his early days of building Blackwood Enterprises. Gone were the luxury amenities, the deferential staff, and the constant connectivity that defined his existence. Instead, he found himself waking at dawn to help prepare the specialized botanical infusions for Lily, learning to identify herbs in the extensive gardens, and following a rigid schedule that prioritized his daughter's healing above all else. "The body heals according to its own rhythms, not our convenience," Dr. Griffin explained during their 3rd morning as Robert complained about the 5 a.m. wake-up call. "Certain compounds are most effective when harvested and prepared at specific times of day, when their medicinal properties are at their peak." Robert bit back a sarcastic retort. He'd agreed to these terms for Lily's sake, but his skepticism remained firmly intact. Each night, he spent hours in the small office Griffin had allowed him to set up, reviewing reports from James about the company. The news was increasingly concerning. Investors growing nervous about his absence, competitors circling, and the merger showing signs of strain. "You're distracted again," Clara observed quietly as they worked side by side in the garden on the 5th morning. She was showing him how to identify the specific leaves Dr. Griffin had prescribed for Lily's morning tea. "My company is losing millions because I'm playing farmer in the woods," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Excuse me if I'm not fully present for Herb Gathering 101. Clara's expression didn't change as she continued carefully selecting leaves. "Your company will survive without you for a few months. Lily might not." The blunt statement silenced him. He watched as Clara moved through the garden with practiced efficiency, her hands gentle but decisive as they selected plants. In the short time they'd been at Griffin's property, she had revealed herself to be far more than the simple caretaker he'd initially dismissed. Her knowledge of Griffin's protocols was extensive, her nursing skills evident in how she monitored Lily's vital signs and adjusted treatments accordingly. "Where did you learn all this?" he finally asked. "You mentioned your brother, but this seems like more than just family experience." Clara glanced up, surprise flickering across her features at his sudden interest. "I was pre-med when my brother got sick. Our parents had died in a car accident the year before, so I was his only family. When conventional treatments failed him, I took a leave of absence to care for him, and found Dr. Griffin." She nodded. "He changed everything, not just for my brother, but for me too. I saw medicine from a completely different perspective. After my brother recovered, I couldn't go back to conventional medical training. It felt incomplete. So you became a nursing assistant instead of a doctor." "I became a healer in my own way," she corrected without defensiveness. "I've spent 15 years studying with various practitioners, herbalists, nutritionists, energy workers. My certification as a nursing assistant is just the credential that allows me to work within the system." Robert absorbed this information, reassessing his initial judgment of her. "And that's why Victoria hired you specifically?" "Yes, we met through a support group for parents of children with cancer. When Lily's condition worsened, she reached out." Clara stood, her basket now full of the morning's harvest. "She loves Lily very much, you know. This separation is difficult for her." Victoria agreed it was better for Lily to have one parent fully focused on her treatment, rather than both of us distracted, Robert replied, following Clara back toward the house. "She's handling the legal aspects of my temporary leave from the company. Still, perhaps you should encourage her to visit. Family connection is vital to the healing process." Robert didn't respond. His relationship with his ex-wife remained complicated, and he wasn't eager to add that dynamic to the already challenging situation. Daily video calls between Lily and Victoria seemed sufficient for now. Inside the house, they found Lily sitting with Dr. Griffin at the kitchen table. To Robert's surprise, she was giggling as the usually stern doctor performed what appeared to be a simple magic trick with a coin. "Daddy, look," she exclaimed when she spotted him. "Dr. Tom can make coins disappear." "Dr. Tom?" Robert raised an eyebrow at the informal address. "She finds Dr. Griffin too difficult to say when she's tired," Griffin explained, his weathered face softening into a smile as he regarded Lily. "And formality creates unnecessary barriers to healing." Robert noticed that Lily's cheeks had more color today, her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. Whether from the mountain air, reduced medications, or Griffin's treatments, something was improving her comfort, if nothing else. "Let's prepare your morning medicine, shall we?" Clara suggested, taking the herbs to the kitchen's preparation area. "Would you like to help, Lily?" "Can I, Daddy?" Lily looked at him with such eagerness that Robert couldn't help but nod, though the idea of his daughter handling medicinal herbs still made him uneasy. As Clara guided Lily through the simple tasks of sorting leaves and pouring water, Dr. Griffin motioned Robert to follow him to the adjacent room where monitoring equipment was set up. "We need to discuss your daughter's baseline assessment," he said, his manner shifting to clinical precision. He pulled up digital scans that Robert recognized from Lily's most recent tests before leaving New York. "The tumor is located here," Griffin pointed to a mass clearly visible in Lily's brain. "Conventional treatment has reduced its periphery, but not its core mass." Robert nodded grimly. "That's what her oncologist said. The type of cells make it resistant to standard chemotherapy protocols." "They're not entirely wrong," Griffin acknowledged, surprising Robert with this concession. "But their approach treats the tumor as an invader to be poisoned, rather than seeing it as a symptom of a system in distress. Cancer cells are invasive by definition, Robert argued. Yes, but they don't arise in a vacuum. Your daughter's immune system has been compromised, her metabolic processes disrupted by environmental factors, and her body's natural defense mechanisms overwhelmed. My approach is to address those underlying issues while simultaneously targeting the tumor cells with compounds that don't damage healthy tissue. Griffin pulled up another screen showing complex biochemical pathways. These are the specific metabolic disruptions we've identified in Lily's system. My protocol targets each of these pathways with precisely calibrated botanical compounds, nutritional interventions, and stress reduction techniques. Despite his skepticism, Robert was impressed by the sophisticated analysis. This wasn't the folk medicine he'd expected, but a complex, systematic approach grounded in biochemistry and physiology. So what's the prognosis? He asked, steeling himself. Griffin studied him carefully before responding. Based on my initial assessment, Lily has a 60% chance of significant improvement within the first month and potentially full remission within 6 months if the protocol is followed precisely and her emotional environment remains supportive. Meaning what exactly? Meaning you need to be fully present, Mr. Blackwood, not just physically in the room while your mind is on Wall Street. Griffin's tone sharpened. When you're with Lily, your devices stay off, your attention undivided. Children sense distraction, and it creates stress that directly impedes healing. Robert bristled at being lectured, but couldn't deny the doctor's point. Even before Lily's illness, he'd been a distracted parent, present for scheduled activities but mentally calculating business moves even during their time together. I'm trying, he said finally. This isn't exactly natural for me. Griffin's expression softened slightly. Parenting sick children isn't natural for anyone. But I've found that the parents who fully commit to the process often experience their own healing alongside their children. Before Robert could respond, his satellite phone, the only connection to the outside world that Griffin had reluctantly allowed, vibrated with an incoming call. The screen showed James's number with the emergency code they'd established. I need to take this, Robert said, already moving toward the door. Griffin's disapproval was palpable, but he merely nodded. Remember what I said about presence. Your daughter needs you more than your company does. In the privacy of his makeshift office, Robert took the call. James sounded panicked. The SEC is initiating an investigation into our pre-merger disclosures, his CFO reported without preamble. Marcus Hendricks is claiming we misrepresented our AI research capabilities to inflate the stock price. Robert cursed under his breath. Marcus Hendricks, his former head of research and development, had left Blackwood Enterprises under contentious circumstances 6 months earlier. He's retaliating for being passed over for the CTO position. There's no substance to these allegations. The board wants an emergency meeting. Your presence is specifically requested. Robert closed his eyes, feeling the familiar pressure of his two worlds colliding. Schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. I'll fly into Burlington and join remotely. They want you in New York, in person. That's not possible right now. James, you know that. Robert, James lowered his voice. I'm saying this as your friend as well as your CFO. If you don't handle this personally, there could be a vote of no confidence. Hendricks has allies on the board. The threat hung in the air between them. Everything Robert had built over 2 decades could unravel in his absence. I'll call you back, he finally said, ending the call. He stood staring out the window at the peaceful mountain landscape, the contrast with his corporate crisis almost laughable. Through the glass, he could see Lily in the garden with Clara, carefully watering seedlings in small pots. Her movements were slow but purposeful, her face serene in concentration. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Clara stood there, her expression concerned. Everything okay? Corporate emergency, he replied curtly. Nothing new. Clara hesitated. Lily's asking if you'll help her with the butterfly garden Dr. Griffin suggested. Apparently certain butterflies are attracted to plants with properties that might help her treatment. The mundane request in the face of his professional crisis almost made Robert laugh. I need to make a few more calls. Of course, Clara said, but lingered in the doorway. You know, when my brother was here, our uncle faced a similar dilemma. His business or being present for the treatment. He chose the business. And Robert prompted when she paused. And my brother recovered anyway. But 25 years later, they barely speak. Some absences create wounds that never fully heal. She left him with that thought, closing the door quietly behind her. Robert turned back to the window, watching his daughter carefully place a small plant into the soil. Her movements were those of a child determined to create life, even as her own hung in the balance. With sudden clarity, he made his decision. He picked up the satellite phone and dialed James back. Schedule the meeting for 3 weeks from now, he instructed. Tell the board I'm unavailable until then due to a critical family health situation. Have legal prepare a comprehensive response to Hendrix's allegations and send it to my secure email for review. 3 weeks could be too late, James protested. Then it's too late. Robert replied with a finality that surprised even himself. My daughter comes first. For once in my life, I'm making the right choice. He hung up, turned off the phone and walked out to the garden where Lily waited. As he knelt beside her in the dirt, her smile of surprise and delight pierced something long dormant in his chest. Did you know butterflies can taste with their feet, Daddy? She asked excitedly. I had no idea, he answered, realizing how many simple wonders he'd missed while chasing wealth and power. Tell me more. As Lily launched into an enthusiastic explanation of butterfly facts she'd learned from Dr. Griffin, Robert noticed Clara watching them from a distance, a small smile on her face. She gave him a slight nod of approval before turning back to her work. For the first time since arriving at the compound, Robert felt wholly present, the weight of his corporate identity temporarily set aside. Whether Griffin's treatments would work remained to be seen, but in this moment, he understood what the doctor had meant about healing extending beyond the patient. Sometimes the parent needed healing too. Chapter 4. Revelations. 2 weeks into their stay at Dr. Griffin's mountain sanctuary, Robert woke before dawn to find Lily's bed empty. A moment of panic seized him until he heard her soft laughter drifting from the kitchen. He found her sitting at the large wooden table with Clara, both of them in pajamas, preparing what looked like a complex mixture of herbs and fruits. Morning, sleepyhead, Lily grinned, the expression so reminiscent of her pre-diagnosis self that Robert's heart lurched. We're making my special breakfast medicine. Want to help? The changes in his daughter over the past 14 days were subtle but unmistakable. Her energy had improved, her appetite had returned, and she'd had fewer headaches. Dr. Griffin cautioned against premature optimism, reminding them that healing wasn't linear. But even Robert's skepticism was beginning to waver. You're up early, he commented, joining them at the table. Clara says dawn energy is the best for healing, Lily explained seriously. And we saw deer in the garden. They were eating Dr. Tom's kale, but he says that's okay because there's enough for everyone. Robert raised an eyebrow at Clara, who smiled. Dr. Griffin believes in balance with nature, not dominance over it. Even garden pests have their purpose. Not exactly the philosophy that built Blackwood Enterprises, Robert murmured, but without his usual edge. The slower pace of life here was affecting him too. He found himself sleeping better, the constant tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Daddy, can I show Clara my special place today? Lily asked, carefully measuring dried herbs into a stone mortar. The one by the creek where the dragonflies live? Of course, Princess, Robert agreed, surprised by the request. Lily had discovered a small clearing near the stream 3 days earlier, and it had quickly become their spot, a private place where they sat together while she told him stories, and he, to his own surprise, shared simplified versions of his childhood memories. Actually, Clara said, I was hoping your dad might take you there today while I run an errand. There's something I need to take care of in town. Robert looked up sharply. Town? You mean the village we passed through? That's 30 miles from here. I know, Dr. Griffin is lending me his truck. She hesitated. It's personal but important. I should be back by evening. There was something in her expression, a fleeting vulnerability that Robert hadn't seen before. His curiosity was piqued, but he merely nodded. We'll be fine. Dr. Griffin is here if Lily needs anything medical. After breakfast, as Lily went with Dr. Griffin for her morning examination, Robert found Clara preparing to leave. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, a change from her usual practical work clothes, and seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Is everything all right?" he asked, surprising himself with his concern. Clara glanced toward the door as if ensuring they were alone. "It's my daughter's birthday," she said quietly. "She's staying with my aunt about 40 miles from here, and I promised I'd visit today." "You have a daughter?" Robert couldn't hide his surprise. In all their conversations, Clara had never mentioned being a mother herself. She nodded, a complex emotion crossing her features. "Amelia, she's 16 today. And she lives with your aunt? Not with you?" Clara's expression closed slightly. "It's complicated. When my brother got sick, I had to make difficult choices. Amelia was just a baby, and caring for a critically ill child while being a single mother." She trailed off. "My aunt offered to help temporarily, but temporary became at longer. I still see Amelia regularly, send money for her care, but you're not really in her life." Robert finished, understanding dawning. The woman who had dedicated herself to caring for other people's children had sacrificed time with her own. "I've tried to explain that I was helping children who might otherwise not survive. That my work was important." Clara's voice held a quiet pain. "But from her perspective, I chose other people's children over her. It's created a distance between us that I've never quite figured out how to bridge." Robert was struck by the parallel to his own life. The parent who justified absence with important work, leaving emotional gaps no success could fill. "Bring her here," he suggested impulsively, "for a visit. Lily would love having another person around, especially a teenager." Clara looked stunned by the offer. "Dr. Griffin's protocols are very specific about limiting outside contact. And Amelia is, well, she's a teenager with strong opinions. She might disrupt the healing environment. Or she might add something we're missing," Robert countered. "Griffin talks about family connections being crucial to healing. Wouldn't authenticity in your life contribute to that?" Clara studied him with new interest. "You've been listening to his philosophies more carefully than I realized." "Don't tell him that," Robert replied with a half smile. "His ego is big enough already." She laughed, a warm, genuine sound he realized he'd rarely heard from her. "I'll think about it. But I should go if I want to be back before dark." After she left, Robert took Lily to her special place by the creek. They sat together on a fallen log, watching water cascade over smooth stones, while dragonflies hovered above the surface. Lily seemed contemplative, her small fingers tracing patterns in the bark. "Daddy, why doesn't Clara talk about her little girl?" she asked suddenly. Robert blinked in surprise. "You know about her daughter?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I heard her crying once, looking at a picture. When I asked, she said it was her daughter, but she doesn't get to see her much because she's busy helping children like me." The simple observation carried a weight that made Robert uncomfortable. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, Princess. Sometimes they think they're doing the right thing, but end up hurting people they love without meaning to. Like you and Mummy," Lily asked innocently. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "You both work all the time. Before I got sick, I mostly saw my nanny." There was no accusation in her tone, just childish observation. "But now you're here all day, every day. It's nice." Robert felt a familiar guilt twist in his gut. Even before the divorce, he'd been an absent father, delegating Lily's care to Victoria and a rotating staff of nannies and tutors. His time with her had been scheduled like business appointments. Quality over quantity, he'd rationalized, never acknowledging that quality required quantity as its foundation. "I'm sorry I wasn't there more," he said softly. "I thought my work was important." "It is important," Lily said, surprising him with her perception. "You help lots of people have jobs. Clara says you're like a big tree that gives shade to many smaller plants." Clara said that. He found it hard to imagine the practical caretaker using such poetic metaphors. "When I asked what you do, she says everyone has important work, but sometimes we forget why we're doing it." Lily picked up a stick and poked at the dirt. "Dr. Tom says I'm doing important work too. Getting better is my job right now." Robert put his arm around her thin shoulders, amazed at how these simple conversations revealed depths to his daughter he'd never taken time to discover. "You're doing that job very well, Princess." They spent the afternoon by the creek, returning to the house as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. Dr. Griffin was in the garden, harvesting evening herbs, but looked up with concern when they approached. "Clara hasn't returned?" he asked, his weathered face creasing with worry. "She said she'd be back by evening," Robert replied, checking his watch. "It's only 5:30. Griffin shook his head. "She's never late for the evening protocol. Not once in all the years I've known her." A faint anxiety began to build in Robert's chest. The mountain roads were treacherous, cell service non-existent for miles. If something had happened, I'm going to look for her, he decided. "Which way is the village?" Griffin gave him directions reluctantly. "Take my other vehicle," he said, pointing to an aged but well-maintained Jeep beside his modest house. "It handles the mountain roads better than your city SUV. But hurry back. Lily needs her evening treatment in 2 hours." Robert drove with mounting concern through the gathering dusk, the winding roads demanding his full attention. 10 miles from the compound, he rounded a sharp curve and spotted Griffin's truck pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. Clara stood beside it, hood open, her expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. He pulled over, relief flooding him. "Car trouble?" "The radiator hose split," she explained as he approached. "I was trying to fix it enough to limp back, but—" She gestured helplessly at the engine. "I've been hoping someone would drive by, but traffic isn't exactly frequent out here. No cell service to call for help either," Robert noted, examining the damage. "This needs a replacement part. We can come back tomorrow with Griffin's mechanic." Clara nodded, though anxiety lingered in her expression. "So I need to get back for Lily's evening protocol. Griffin's handling it. He seemed confident he could manage one night." Robert opened the Jeep's passenger door. "Did you get to see your daughter at least?" A shadow crossed Clara's face as she gathered her things from the truck. "Yes and no. I went to my aunt's house, but Amelia wasn't there. She'd gone to a friend's home after school and—" She sighed deeply. She knew I was coming. She chose not to be there. The hurt in her voice was raw, unguarded in a way Clara rarely allowed herself to be. As they drove back toward Griffin's compound, Robert found himself wanting to offer comfort, but unsure how. Emotional support had never been his strength. "Teenagers can be difficult," he offered inadequately. "I'm sure she just lost track of time." Clara shook her head. "No, my aunt confirmed she knew exactly when I was coming. This was deliberate." She stared out the window at the darkening forest. "I left a gift and a card, same as last year and the year before." They drove in silence for several minutes before Clara spoke again, her voice soft in the dimness of the Jeep's cabin. "The irony doesn't escape me, you know. I spend my life caring for other people's children while my own daughter feels abandoned." "You made choices you thought were right at the time," Robert said. "We all do. The right choices for everyone except the person who should have mattered most." Clara turned to look at him directly. "Don't make my mistake, Robert. When Lily recovers, and she will, don't go back to being the absentee father who shows love through provision rather than presence." The use of his first name, unusual for the formal Clara, underscored the personal nature of her advice. Before he could respond, they crested a hill and Griffin's compound came into view. Warm lights glowing in the windows against the mountain darkness. Inside, they found Lily in the treatment room with Griffin, looking sleepy but content as he administered her evening medications. She brightened when she saw Clara. "You're back. Did you see your daughter? Did she like her present? Can she come visit us?" Clara managed a smile, though Robert could see the effort it cost her. "She wasn't able to see me today, sweetie, but maybe another time." Lily's face fell. "That's sad. Birthdays should be with family." "Yes, they should," Clara agreed softly, exchanging a meaningful glance with Robert before turning her attention to the treatment protocols. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Robert found Clara sitting alone on the porch, staring at the star-filled sky. He handed her a cup of the herbal tea she'd taught him to prepare. "Your offer earlier," she said without looking at him, "about bringing Amelia here. Did you mean it?" "Of course. Even if it meant explaining who I really am, a single mother who chose her career over her child." Robert sat beside her. "You chose to help others, including my daughter. There's no shame in that." He hesitated before adding, "Besides, I'm hardly in a position to judge anyone's parenting choices." Clara smiled faintly. The mighty Robert Blackwood admitting imperfection. "Dr. Griffin's treatments must be affecting you too." "Don't tell him that either," Robert replied, surprised by how comfortable their banter had become. "But yes, call your daughter. Invite her. The worst she can say is no." And the best she can say is yes, Clara murmured, her gaze returning to the stars. Sometimes healing comes from unexpected directions, doesn't it? Robert thought of his own journey, from skeptical businessman to believer in possibilities beyond conventional wisdom. Of Lily's improving condition defying medical prognosis, of this woman beside him gradually transforming from employee to something he wasn't quite ready to name. Yes, he agreed quietly. It absolutely does. Chapter 5. Complications. The arrival of Amelia Johnson 3 days later brought a storm of teenage energy to the peaceful mountain sanctuary. Clara had been surprised when her daughter agreed to the visit, and even more surprised when Amelia actually showed up, driven by Clara's aunt, who quickly departed after an awkward greeting. Standing on Dr. Griffin's porch, Amelia looked like a living contradiction. Dyed purple hair and combat boots at odds with the natural surroundings, her resemblance to Clara unmistakable, despite her efforts to obscure it with makeup and attitude. "So this is where you've been hiding out," she said by way of greeting, eyeing the compound with obvious skepticism. "Looks like something from a cult documentary." Robert, watching from the kitchen window, saw Clara flinch almost imperceptibly before composing herself. "It's a healing center, not a cult," she replied calmly. "And I'm grateful you decided to come. Aunt Marge needed a break from me," Amelia shrugged, hoisting her backpack. "Don't make this into some mother-daughter bonding fantasy." The interaction made Robert uncomfortable, too reminiscent of his own strained relationship with his father. He'd grown up with that same bitter disappointment, that same defensive anger disguising hurt. Before he could consider the wisdom of intervening, Lily bounded onto the porch. "Hi, I'm Lily. Are you Clara's daughter? You have purple hair. It's so pretty. Do you like butterflies? We have a butterfly garden and you can help if you want." Amelia's hard expression softened slightly in the face of this enthusiastic greeting. Hey, yeah, I'm Amelia. You're staying in the room next to mine," Lily continued, reaching for Amelia's hand without hesitation. "I helped Clara put flowers in there for you. And Dr. Tom says you can pick herbs if you're careful and don't mix them up." To everyone's surprise, Amelia allowed herself to be led inside by the chattering 5-year-old, throwing only one guarded glance back at her mother. "Well, that went better than expected," Robert commented as Clara entered the kitchen, her expression a complex mixture of hope and apprehension. "Lily has a gift for disarming people," she replied with a small smile. "Thank you again for suggesting this. I know it complicates things." Sometimes complications are worth it. He surprised himself with the sentiment, so at odds with his usual preference for order and control. Dr. Griffin entered from his study, frowning slightly. "While I appreciate the importance of family connections, I hope this disruption won't interfere with Lily's treatment schedule." "It won't," Clara assured him firmly. "I'll make sure of it." The first day of Amelia's visit passed in a delicate dance of awkward interactions and careful distance. She remained polite but cool toward her mother, answered Dr. Griffin's questions with minimal words, and regarded Robert with the natural suspicion teenagers hold for authority figures. Only with Lily did she show a different side, patient, gentle, almost protective. By evening, Robert found Amelia and Lily in the butterfly garden, the teenager helping the younger girl identify different species that fluttered around the flowering plants. "That's a monarch," Amelia was explaining. "They migrate thousands of miles to Mexico every winter. Pretty badass for something so small and delicate." "Language," Robert reminded her mildly as he approached. Amelia rolled her eyes but amended, "Pretty impressive, I mean." "Dad says bad words when he's on business calls," Lily informed her new friend solemnly. "But he doesn't know I can hear him through the air vents." Robert felt his face warm as Amelia smirked. "Busted by a 5-year-old Mr. Blackwood." "Apparently so," he acknowledged with good humor. "Lily, it's time for your evening treatment. Can Amelia come too? She's teaching me about butterflies. Did you know they taste with their feet? That's why they stand on flowers before drinking the nectar." Robert glanced at Amelia, expecting resistance to what must seem like childish activities, but the teenager merely shrugged. "I don't mind if it's allowed." "Dr. Griffin is pretty strict about who's present during treatments," Robert explained. "But maybe afterward, you two can continue your butterfly lessons." As Lily skipped ahead toward the house, Amelia lingered, studying Robert with unexpected intensity. Is she really going to get better, or is this all some expensive placebo to make you feel better about your kid being sick? The blunt question caught him off guard. That's a complicated question. I'm 16, not 6. I can handle complicated. Robert considered his answer carefully. A month ago, I would have agreed with you. I was convinced this was all nonsense. But Lily's latest scans show a 15% reduction in tumor size. Her blood markers are improving. She has more energy, fewer headaches. And you think it's because of herbs and butterfly gardens? Amelia's tone was skeptical but not dismissive. I think it's because of an integrated approach I don't fully understand yet, Robert admitted. The medicine is part of it. So is the environment, the reduced stress, the clean air and food. And so is having people around who genuinely care about her well-being. Amelia absorbed this, plucking a leaf and twirling it between her fingers. My mum cares about a lot of kids' well-being. The opening was obvious, but Robert treaded carefully. She does. It's a rare gift, being able to care that deeply for children who aren't your own. Yeah, super rare, Amelia replied, her bitterness thinly veiled. So rare she didn't have any left over for her actual kid. Have you asked her about those choices? Robert ventured. Really listened to her reasons? What's to hear? She chose sick kids over me. End of story. Amelia tossed the leaf away. Whatever. I'm only here for a week, then back to Aunt Marge's, and everyone can go back to their regular programming. She strode toward the house, leaving Robert to reflect on the parallels between this wounded teenager and his own younger self. He had never given his father the chance to explain his absences, had carried that resentment into adulthood, where it colored his own approach to parenting. The realization was uncomfortable but necessary. Inside, he found Clara preparing Lily's evening herbal infusion, while Dr. Griffin reviewed the day's vital signs. The atmosphere in the treatment room was focused, methodical, a sharp contrast to the emotional currents swirling elsewhere in the house. "Where's Amelia?" Clara asked, looking up from her work. She went inside. "Probably to her room," Robert replied, not wanting to betray the teenager's confidences. "She and Lily seem to be getting along well." Clara's expression brightened momentarily before concern returned. "I hope this visit isn't too difficult for her, or disruptive for Lily's treatment." Actually, Dr. Griffin interjected, surprising them both. Lily's afternoon readings were remarkably stable. Better than yesterday's. The stimulation of a new friend seems to be having a positive effect. "See," Lily piped up from her treatment chair. "I told you I needed a big sister." The innocent comment hung in the air, loaded with implications none of the adults were prepared to address. Clara busied herself with the medications, while Robert distracted Lily with questions about butterflies. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Robert found himself unable to rest. The satellite phone showed 3 missed calls from James, increasingly urgent messages about the SEC investigation and board concerns. He'd been avoiding these issues, focusing entirely on Lily, but reality was intruding despite his best efforts. He stepped onto the porch for privacy, dialing his CFO's number. James answered immediately, his voice tense. "Robert, where have you been?" "The situation is deteriorating. Hendricks has gone to the financial press with his allegations. The stock dropped 12% today alone." Robert felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with corporate crisis, but it was tempered now by a new perspective. "What's our legal position?" "Solid in substance, precarious in optics. The board is convening an emergency session tomorrow. Your presence is not optional this time. I told you I can't leave Vermont right now. My daughter—" "Robert," James interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically firm, "I've covered for you for weeks. I've fielded questions, reassured investors, managed the board. But I can't stand in for you tomorrow. This is your company on the line, everything you've built." The weight of the decision pressed on Robert like a physical force. He had responsibilities to thousands of employees, to shareholders who had trusted him with their investments. Yet the thought of leaving Lily, even temporarily, filled him with dread. "Let me see what I can arrange," he finally said. "I'll call you back in an hour." He ended the call, staring into the darkness of the surrounding forest. Behind him, the screen door creaked. "Trouble at the office?" He turned to find Clara standing there, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the night chill. "You could say that," he admitted. "A situation that requires my physical presence in New York." She studied him in the dim porch light. "You're considering going. I have responsibilities to my employees, to the people who depend on Blackwood Enterprises for their livelihoods." Even as he said it, he heard the echo of justifications he'd made for years, the same ones that had cost him his marriage and relationship with his daughter. "Lily depends on you too," Clara said quietly. "Her treatment is at a critical phase." "I know that," frustration edged his voice. "But if I don't address this situation, there might not be a company to return to. Thousands of people could lose their jobs." Clara was silent for a long moment. "When my brother was sick, I had to choose between my medical studies and his care. I chose him and never regretted it, though it altered the course of my life." She paused. "But with Amelia, I made different choices afterward. Choices I've questioned every day since. What would you do now if you were me?" "I can't answer that," she replied. "But I can tell you that Lily is stronger than she was a month ago. Dr. Griffin and I can maintain her treatment protocol for a day or two. And sometimes," she hesitated, "sometimes children need to see that their parents have responsibilities beyond them, responsibilities they honor, even when difficult." Her response surprised him. "You're saying I should go?" "I'm saying there might be a middle path. Go, address what's urgent, and return quickly. Show Lily that you can be trusted to come back to her, that your absence doesn't mean abandonment." Clara glanced back toward the house. "It's a lesson I wish I'd learned sooner with Amelia." Before Robert could respond, they heard the screen door open again. Amelia stood there, her expression making it clear she'd overheard at least part of their conversation. "Classic mom advice," she said, her voice brittle with forced casualness. "Always finding ways to justify leaving." Clara flinched visibly. "Amelia—" "Save it," the teenager interrupted. "I just came to say Lily's asking for water. She woke up thirsty." Robert moved toward the door. "I'll go." "I already got it for her," Amelia said. "She's fine. Just thought someone should know." She directed this last comment pointedly at her mother before turning back inside. Clara closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "Go check on Lily, please. I need to try to talk to Amelia." Robert found Lily drowsy but awake, clutching the water glass Amelia had brought her. "The big-haired girl is sad," she murmured sleepily. "She misses her mum even though her mum is right here." The simple observation held a wisdom that continually surprised him coming from his 5-year-old. "Sometimes people can be together but still feel far apart," he explained, smoothing her hair. "Especially when they've been separated for a long time. Like you and Mommy," Lily nodded sagely. "You're both my parents, but you don't live together anymore." "Something like that, yes. Are you going away, Daddy?" she asked suddenly, her eyes more alert. "I heard you talking on the phone." Robert sighed, realizing he couldn't shield her from reality. "I might need to go to New York for a day or two, Princess. There's a problem at work that needs my help." To his surprise, Lily didn't protest or cry. She simply studied him with those solemn eyes that seemed to see straight through adult pretenses. "Will you come back?" "Of course I will," he assured her, his throat tight. "Nothing could keep me away from you. Promise?" "Cross your heart?" "Cross my heart," he said, making the childish gesture that suddenly felt like the most serious oath he'd ever taken. Lily nodded, satisfied. "Then it's okay. Clarence and Dr. Tom will take care of me until you come back. And Amelia can teach me more about butterflies." As Robert tucked her in again, he was struck by his daughter's resilience, her ability to accept temporary separation without fear, secure in the knowledge that he would return. It was a trust he had done little to earn before their time in Vermont. Yet here she was, offering it freely. In the hallway, he could hear the muffled sounds of Clara and Amelia's conversation from the teenager's room. Not the words, but the emotional cadence of plea and resistance, explanation and rejection. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. By morning, Robert had made his decision. He found Dr. Griffin in the garden at dawn, harvesting the early herbs for Lily's treatment. "I need to go to New York for 48 hours, he said without preamble. "A situation at my company requires my personal attention." Griffin straightened, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Your daughter's treatment will continue exactly as prescribed," Robert interrupted. "Clara knows the protocols. You'll both be here, and I'll return the day after tomorrow, no matter what's happening in New York." The old doctor considered this, then nodded slowly. "The foundation we've established should sustain her through a brief interruption in your presence, but no longer than 2 days." "Understood," Robert agreed, relieved by Griffin's unexpected reasonableness. "I've arranged for a helicopter to land here at noon. It's the fastest way to Burlington, where my jet is waiting." As preparations for his departure accelerated, Robert was acutely aware of the shifting dynamics in the household. Clara maintained professional focus on Lily's care while navigating the emotional minefield with Amelia. Dr. Griffin proceeded with treatment schedules, making minor adjustments to compensate for the disruption. Lily accepted the situation with surprising equanimity, extracting multiple promises of his swift return. Only Amelia remained apart, watching the adults with teenage cynicism. As Robert prepared to leave, she approached him unexpectedly. "She won't believe you're coming back, you know," she said bluntly. "No matter what you promise." Robert paused in packing his briefcase. "Lily seems to understand." "Not Lily," Amelia clarified. "My mom. She won't believe you'll choose this place, this situation, over your big, important company, because nobody ever chooses just being present over being important." The insight was startling from someone so young, yet pierced directly to the heart of Clara's hesitation, her careful distance despite their growing connection. "I'm coming back," he said with quiet certainty. "For Lily, for the treatment, and yes, for your mother too, who has given more to my family than I can ever repay." Amelia studied him, skepticism warring with a teenager's desperate want to believe in adults who keep their word. "We'll see," she finally said, but something in her expression had softened slightly. As the helicopter approached, its rhythmic thudding breaking the mountain's silence, Robert gathered his family, for that's what they had somehow become, on the porch for goodbyes. Lily hugged him fiercely. Dr. Griffin offered gruff reminders about urban toxins and stress management, and Clara provided last-minute updates on treatment schedules. 48 hours, he promised, holding Lily's small hand. No matter what. As the helicopter lifted above the trees, he watched their figures grow smaller, his daughter waving enthusiastically, Clara standing protective and still, Amelia hanging back with arms crossed, Dr. Griffin already turning back to his work. The mountain sanctuary receded, and with it the peace he'd found there. New York, with all its demands and complications, awaited. Chapter 6. The Crisis. The New York that greeted Robert bore little resemblance to the city he'd left a month earlier. Or rather, it was unchanged. The same towering buildings, the same frantic pace, the same sleek Blackwood Enterprises headquarters dominating its Manhattan block. It was Robert himself who had changed, the transformation becoming apparent with each step back into his former life. His executive assistant Jennifer gaped when he entered the office in khakis and a button-down shirt rather than his usual bespoke suit. The boardroom fell silent as he took his seat without the commanding presence that had once been as much a part of him as his name. "Let's get to the point," Robert said, bypassing the formalities that typically opened board meetings. "I have 43 hours before I return to Vermont. What exactly are Marcus Hendricks' allegations, and what evidence supports them?" James slid a folder across the polished table. "He claims we falsified research data on the neural network's capabilities to inflate our valuation for the merger. Specifically, that the system's accuracy rates were manually adjusted in demonstrations for Nexus technologies." Robert scanned the documents, a cold anger building as he recognized the deception at work. These so-called internal memos approving data manipulation, they're forgeries. This isn't my signature, and this meeting referenced on March 12th never happened. I was in Tokyo that entire week. "We know that," James assured him. "Legal has assembled documentation proving these are fabrications. The problem is, the financial press has already run with the story. The SEC has opened a preliminary inquiry, and Nexus is wavering on the merger terms." The next several hours passed in a blur of strategy sessions, legal consultations and emergency calls with key investors. By evening, Robert found himself alone in his corner office, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond the windows. Once, this view had represented everything he'd achieved. Now it felt strangely hollow. His phone rang, the secure line he'd established for communication with Vermont. Clara's voice came through, simultaneously familiar and distant. "How is she?" Robert asked immediately, tension he hadn't realized he was carrying releasing at the sound of Clara's voice. "Stable," Clara replied. She had some increased discomfort this afternoon, but Dr. Griffin adjusted her formulations, and she's sleeping peacefully now. "And Amelia?" A pause. "Still here, still guarded, but she spent the entire day with Lily, teaching her to make friendship bracelets and identify constellations in Dr. Griffin's astronomy. Books?" Robert smiled, picturing the unlikely pair, the purple-haired teenager and his golden-haired daughter bent over colorful threads and star charts. "Thank you for calling." "It's been difficult?" Clara suggested when he trailed off. "Different," he corrected. "Being back here, everything looks the same but feels wrong somehow. The mountain has that effect on people," she said softly. "It recalibrates your sense of what matters." They fell into a comfortable silence, miles apart, yet connected by shared purpose. Finally, Clara spoke again. "Robert, there's something I should tell you." The line suddenly filled with static, her voice breaking up. "Clara, you're cutting out. Concerned about..." More static. "Fever spiked." The connection failed entirely. Robert tried calling back immediately, but the line remained dead. A knot formed in his stomach as he tried the alternate number for Dr. Griffin's landline. No answer. The satellite phone system must be experiencing interference from the mountain terrain or weather conditions. Not unusual, but the timing couldn't have been worse. He checked his watch. 10 hours until his morning meetings with the SEC representatives and Nexus executives. 34 hours until his promised return to Vermont. He tried the connections twice more without success, then made a decision. "Jennifer," he called to his assistant who was working late to help manage the crisis, "cancel tomorrow's meetings." "All of them?" She looked up, startled. "Sir, the SEC investigators are flying in specifically to..." "Reschedule. James can handle the preliminary discussions. So I'm leaving for Vermont tonight. But the board specifically requested..." "The board doesn't dictate my schedule when my daughter needs me," Robert said with finality. "Have the helicopter ready in 30 minutes. 2 frantic hours later, Robert was in the air again, flying through darkness toward the Green Mountains. The pilot had warned of approaching storms, the likely cause of the communication disruption, but Robert insisted on proceeding. By the time they approached Vermont, rain lashed the helicopter, and turbulence made conversation impossible. "We can't land at the compound in these conditions," the pilot shouted over the roar. "Nearest safe landing is Burlington. We'll have to wait out the storm." "Not an option," Robert replied, remembering the urgency in Clara's broken transmission. "Get me as close as you safely can." They compromised on a small regional airport 30 miles from Griffin's property. Robert arranged for an all-wheel drive vehicle, despite the rental agent's warnings about mountain roads in the storm. Armed with GPS coordinates and determination, he set out into the tempest. The journey that should have taken an hour stretched to 3 as washed-out sections of road forced detours. Twice he nearly turned back, the rational part of his brain arguing that risking his life on treacherous mountain roads helped no one. But each time he pressed on, driven by Clara's fragmented words and the promise he'd made to Lily. It was nearly dawn when he finally reached the compound, the storm having passed but leaving chaos in its wake. Fallen branches littered the approach, and the stream beside the property had swollen to 3 times its normal size. The house stood dark except for a single light in what Robert recognized as Lily's room. He rushed inside without knocking, dripping rainwater on the wooden floors. The main room was empty, the usual morning preparations for Lily's treatments conspicuously absent. Fear propelled him toward the lit bedroom, where he found Clara slumped in a chair beside Lily's bed, her head resting on her arms in exhausted sleep. Dr. Griffin stood on the opposite side, his weathered hand resting on Lily's forehead. And Lily, Robert's heart constricted at the sight of his daughter. Her face was flushed with fever, her breathing rapid and shallow. The improvement of recent weeks seemed erased, returning her to the fragile state that had first brought them to Vermont. Dr. Griffin looked up, unsurprised by Robert's dramatic entrance. "You came back. What happened?" Robert demanded, moving to the bedside. "She was improving. All her markers were better." "Healing isn't linear," Griffin replied, his voice betraying fatigue beyond his years. "The tumor is shrinking, but it's releasing compounds as it breaks down. Her system is struggling to process them. Why didn't you call for emergency transport? She needs a hospital." The storm knocked out all communications and made the roads impassable. Griffin cut him off. Even if we could have reached a hospital, moving her in this state would have been dangerous. Besides, conventional medicine has little to offer that we don't have here. Clara stirred at the sound of their voices, lifting her head. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually neat appearance was disheveled from what had clearly been a night of vigilant care. "Robert?" she murmured, disbelieving. "How did you—" "I got part of your call, enough to know something was wrong." He knelt beside her chair. "How long has she been like this?" "The fever started about an hour after you left," Clara explained, straightening to her professional demeanor despite her exhaustion. "Initially low-grade, manageable. But by evening it spiked dramatically. We've been alternating herbal antipyretics with cool compresses through the night." "And?" Robert prompted, hearing what she wasn't saying. Clara exchanged glances with Griffin before answering. "And her neurological responses are concerning. The pressure in her brain appears to be increasing. The clinical terms couldn't disguise the gravity of the situation." Robert reached for Lily's small hand, finding it hot and dry. "What are the treatment options?" "I've prepared a more aggressive formulation," Griffin said, indicating a collection of bottles and equipment on the bedside table. "It should help reduce the inflammation and support her body's natural detoxification processes." "Should?" Robert challenged, his fear manifesting as anger. "You've been telling me for weeks about your protocols and success rates, and now all you can offer is should." "Dad?" Lily's weak voice interrupted the brewing confrontation. Her eyes opened, glassy with fever but alert enough to recognize him. "You came back early." Robert's anger dissolved instantly. "Of course I did, Princess. I promised, remember?" She managed a small smile. "Cross your heart." "That's right, cross my heart." He brushed damp hair from her forehead, alarmed at the heat radiating from her skin. "I don't feel good," she admitted, her small face contorting with discomfort. "My head hurts a lot." "I know, sweetheart. But Dr. Griffin has special medicine that's going to make you feel better." Lily's gaze drifted to Clara. "Clara stayed all night. And Amelia, too. They sang songs when I couldn't sleep." For the first time, Robert noticed Amelia curled in a window seat across the room, finally succumbing to sleep herself after what had clearly been a long night of helping. The sight of the typically defiant teenager, now vulnerable in exhausted slumber, struck him deeply. "Let's proceed with the treatment," Griffin said quietly, breaking the moment. "Clara, prepare the infusion while I explain the process to Robert." The next hour passed in tense focus as they administered Griffin's treatment, a complex series of infusions, compresses, and gentle manipulations designed to reduce pressure and inflammation while supporting Lily's stressed system. Throughout it all, Robert held his daughter's hand, speaking soft reassurances when pain made her whimper. By mid-morning, the fever began to subside. Lily drifted into a more peaceful sleep, her breathing gradually returning to normal. The crisis wasn't over, Griffin warned, but the immediate danger had passed. In the kitchen, while Clara prepared a simple breakfast for the exhausted household, Robert finally allowed himself to process the night's events. The fear that had driven him through the storm lingered, transforming into a new understanding of priorities and perspective. "You didn't have to come back," Clara said softly, placing tea before him. "We would have managed." "Yes, I did," he contradicted gently. "Not because you needed me, but because I needed to be here. I made a promise to Lily, and to myself." Clara studied him, noting the change that even 24 hours in his corporate world hadn't erased. "And your company." "The crisis." "James will handle it." "And if he can't," Robert shrugged, the gesture so unlike his former calculating self that it startled a small smile from Clara. "Then perhaps it's time for Blackwood Enterprises to become something different, something that serves life rather than consuming it." Amelia shuffled into the kitchen, rumpled and bleary-eyed. She paused upon seeing Robert, then continued to the refrigerator without comment. "Thank you," Robert said to her back. "Clara told me you stayed up with Lily, helped keep her comfortable." Amelia turned a defensive shrug ready, but something in Robert's sincere gratitude seemed to disarm her practiced indifference. "She was scared," she said simply. "Kids shouldn't be scared alone." The statement hung in the air, laden with implications about Amelia's own experiences. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she set down a mug, the only outward sign of the emotion that crossed her face. "No," Clara agreed quietly. "They shouldn't." Dr. Griffin entered, his movements slow with fatigue but his eyes alert. "She's responding well to the treatment. Fever's down to 100.2, and the neurological indicators are stabilizing. We'll continue the protocol every 2 hours." The collective relief was palpable, though tempered by the knowledge that they weren't yet in the clear. Robert insisted that Clara and Amelia rest, while he took the next monitoring shift with Griffin. In Lily's room, as they checked vital signs and prepared the next round of medications, Griffin spoke with uncharacteristic openness. "I've treated hundreds of children over 4 decades, Blackwood. Some recovered fully, some partially, some not at all." "And Lily?" Robert prompted, dreading the answer yet needing to hear it. Griffin's weathered face softened. "Your daughter has something many patients lack, a father who finally understands that true healing requires presence, not just provision. That transformation in you is as important to her recovery as any medicine I can provide." "I should have understood that years ago," Robert admitted, "before it took a crisis to bring me to my senses." "Most people need the storm before they see the truth," Griffin replied, his gaze drifting to the window, where the aftermath of last night's tempest was visible in scattered branches and mud-strewn paths. "The question is what they build once the sky clears." Throughout the day, they worked in shifts, monitoring Lily's condition and administering treatments. By evening, her improvement was undeniable. The fever gone, her eyes clear, her appetite returning cautiously. She asked for stories, and to everyone's surprise, it was Amelia who volunteered, reading from an old book of fairy tales found in Griffin's library. As darkness fell, Robert stood on the porch, breathing the rain-washed air and watching stars emerge in the clearing sky. Clara joined him, 2 mugs of herbal tea in hand. "She's asking for you," she said, passing him a steaming cup. "Wants to know if you'll stay the night in her room, in case the bad feeling comes back." "Of course," Robert nodded, grateful for the simple request that allowed him to be useful in a way all his wealth and power could not. They stood in companionable silence, the events of the past 24 hours creating a new intimacy neither was quite ready to name. "I need to take Amelia back to my aunt's tomorrow," Clara finally said. "Her school break ends Monday, and she's already missed too many classes this semester. Will you come back?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Clara's eyes met his, steady and clear. "Yes, I promised Lily I'd see her treatment through, and I keep my promises." The unspoken parallel to his own promise hung between them, the commitment they'd both made to prioritize a child's needs over their own convenience or comfort. "Besides," Clara added with the hint of a smile, "someone has to make sure you don't forget how to identify the right herbs for her morning tea." Inside, they could hear Amelia's voice finishing a story for Lily, the teenager's usual defensive edge softened by the simple act of caring for someone more vulnerable than herself. In that moment, watching Clara's face as she listened to her daughter's gentle interaction, Robert understood what Griffin had been trying to teach him all along. Healing wasn't just about medicine or protocols or even miracle cures. It was about connection, the intricate web of relationships that sustained life through its most difficult challenges. Lily's recovery and his own transformation were part of the same process, inseparable from Clara and Amelia's journey toward reconciliation. From Griffin's mission to preserve healing wisdom in a world too busy for slow medicine. "I should check on Lily," Robert said, reluctant to break the moment but aware of his promise. Clara nodded, her hand briefly touching his arm, a gesture so simple yet so laden with understanding that it stayed with him as he went inside to his daughter's bedside. Lily was awake, her color improved, though shadows of her ordeal remained in the tiredness around her eyes. She patted the chair beside her bed. "You came back through the storm," she said, the statement somewhere between question and wonder. "I promised I would," Robert replied, taking her small hand in his. "No storm could keep me away." Lily considered this with the serious contemplation of childhood. "Amelia says grown-ups break promises all the time." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Robert thought of all the promises he had broken over the years, to Victoria, to colleagues, to himself. The ones that had seemed necessary for success, for progress, for the empire he'd prioritized over his family. "And I won't break my promises to you ever again, Princess." "Cross your heart," she asked, their ritual now carrying the weight of tested faith. "Cross my heart," he confirmed, making the gesture that had once seemed childish, but now felt like the most solemn vow he could offer. As Lily drifted towards sleep, her hand still in his, Robert realized with startling clarity that the crisis wasn't just about her health. It was the culmination of a journey that had brought him face to face with his own priorities, forcing him to choose between the life he had constructed and the one he truly wanted. In the quiet of the Vermont night, watching his daughter's peaceful breathing, Robert Blackwood made his choice. Chapter 7: Transformation. 3 months later, spring had fully embraced the Vermont mountains, transforming Dr. Griffin's compound into a riot of new growth. The butterfly garden that Lily and Amelia had planned together now flourished with native flowers, attracting colorful visitors that delighted the 5-year-old who ran among them, nets and identification cards in hand. Robert watched from the porch swing, laptop balanced on his knees as he reviewed quarterly reports from Blackwood Enterprises. The company had weathered its crisis. The SEC investigation had cleared them of wrongdoing, Marcus Hendricks' allegations proven to be fabrications born of professional jealousy. The merger had proceeded, albeit with revised terms that actually proved more favorable in the long run, but Blackwood Enterprises itself had changed as profoundly as its CEO. Robert's new leadership approach, implemented through video conferences and weekly visits to New York, emphasized sustainability, work-life balance, and ethical innovation. The corporate culture that had once prized ruthless efficiency above all now celebrated collaboration and purpose. Profits hadn't suffered. If anything, the company had grown stronger through its transformation. "Your 10 o'clock meeting is about to start," Clara reminded him, emerging from the house with a mug of tea. She'd long since dispensed with the formal boundaries of their initial employer-employee relationship, though her practical efficiency remained unchanged. "Thanks," Robert nodded, accepting both the reminder and the tea with a smile that lingered as she settled beside him on the swing. These quiet moments between Lily's treatments and his business responsibilities had become a cherished constant over the past months. His laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Dr. Reynolds, Lily's oncologist, connecting from New York for their weekly consultation. Robert adjusted the screen so Clara could see as well, the three of them having formed an unconventional but effective medical team. "Good morning," Dr. Reynolds greeted them, his initial skepticism about Griffin's methods having evolved into cautious respect as Lily's scans continued to show improvement. "I've reviewed the latest results. The tumor has reduced another 12% since last month." Clara's hand found Robert's, squeezing it silently, their habitual response to good news, a wordless sharing of relief and hope. "That's consistent with Dr. Griffin's assessment," Robert confirmed. "He's adjusting her protocol to focus more on immune support now that the primary mass is significantly reduced." Dr. Reynolds nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been consulting with colleagues at Johns Hopkins about Lily's case. There's growing interest in studying these integrated approaches more systematically. The combination of Griffin's botanical formulations with targeted conventional therapies is showing promise that neither approach achieved alone." "You're considering a formal research collaboration?" Clara asked, her professional interest piqued. "We're in preliminary discussions," Reynolds confirmed. "If Dr. Griffin is amenable, of course. His methods deserve scientific validation, especially given results like Lily's." Robert smiled at the irony, the medical establishment that had once ostracized Griffin now seeking his wisdom, driven by outcomes they couldn't ignore. "I'll speak with him, but don't hold your breath. He's not exactly eager for institutional entanglements." Their discussion continued, reviewing Lily's progress, adjusting her care plan, and scheduling her next visit to New York for comprehensive testing. As the call ended, Robert set the laptop aside, his gaze returning to his daughter in the garden. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," he said quietly. 6 months ago, every specialist in the country told us she was terminal. Now they're using words like remission and recovery. Dr. Griffin would say it was never just about the medicine," Clara replied, her eyes following Lily's energetic movements. "It was about creating the conditions for her body to heal itself. The medicine, the environment, the emotional support, all of it matters. And the love," Robert added, his hand still holding hers. That matters most of all. The simple statement hung between them, layered with meanings neither had fully articulated, despite the growing closeness of recent months. Clara's expression softened, though she maintained the careful balance they'd established, deeply connected but deliberately patient with the evolution of their relationship. Speaking of love, she said, shifting to safer conversational ground, Amelia's bus should arrive this afternoon. Lily's been counting the hours since she woke up. The mention of Amelia brought a smile to Robert's face. The surly teenager who had arrived at Griffin's compound 3 months ago had undergone her own transformation. Weekly visits had become a fixed part of their routine. Clara's aunt driving her up on Friday afternoons, Robert or Clara taking her back Sunday evenings. Each visit bridged more of the gap between mother and daughter, their relationship healing alongside Lily. "I've been thinking about that, actually," Robert said, choosing his words carefully. "The commute from your aunt's house is becoming impractical with summer approaching. And Lily benefits so much from Amelia's visits." Clara raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more to his observation. "What would you think about finding a more permanent solution?" he continued. "A place where you and Amelia could live that's closer to here. Or perhaps," he hesitated, venturing into territory they'd carefully avoided, "perhaps a place for all of us, after Lily's treatment is complete." Clara's expression stilled, her practical nature immediately assessing the implications. "Robert, I'm still Lily's caregiver. Blurring those lines could complicate—" "You stopped being just a caregiver months ago," he interrupted gently, "to both of us. And I think we've moved well beyond employer and employee, wouldn't you say?" A faint color touched her cheeks, but her directness remained intact. "Even so, there are considerations. Amelia is finally rebuilding her trust in me. A sudden change in our living situation, especially one involving new relationships, could set us back. I'm not suggesting anything sudden," Robert clarified, "just that we start thinking about the future. Lily's treatment will be complete in a few more months. Dr. Griffin has already suggested a transition to maintenance protocols that won't require daily supervision." "And your company? Your life in New York?" Robert looked out at the mountains, the perspective that had once seemed like exile now feeling more like home. "The company can continue with the hybrid leadership model we've established. As for New York," he shrugged, "there's a perfectly good Blackwood Enterprises office in Burlington that's been underutilized for years. And Victoria has already agreed to adjusted custody arrangements that would allow Lily to attend school in Vermont." Clara's surprise was evident. "You've given this serious thought." "I've had 3 months to reevaluate everything about my life," Robert acknowledged. "What matters, what doesn't, who matters?" His gaze met hers directly. "I know what I want my future to look like. I'm just hoping it might align with what you want for yours and Amelia's." Before Clara could respond, Dr. Griffin emerged from his study, interrupting the moment with his customary lack of social awareness. "Lily's afternoon infusion is prepared," he announced, "and we should discuss adjustments to her nutritional protocol. The latest tests show increased enzymatic activity that suggests we can reduce certain supplements." Clara rose, professional responsibility reasserting itself. "I'll get her from the garden." As she walked away, Robert caught Griffin watching him with knowing eyes. "Personal entanglements complicate treatment protocols," the older man commented, though without his usual judgment. "Life is complicated," Robert replied simply. "That's what makes it worth living." Griffin's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "You've changed, Blackwood. When you first arrived, you thought everything could be solved with money or power." "I had excellent teachers," Robert acknowledged, "including a cantankerous old doctor who showed me there are forms of healing conventional medicine hasn't begun to understand." Their conversation was interrupted by Lily's return, her cheeks flushed with outdoor activity, as Clara guided her toward the treatment room. The child's improving health was visible in every movement, the bounce in her step, the clarity in her eyes, the growing thickness of her once thinning hair. "Daddy, I've found a morning cloak butterfly. Amelia's going to be so excited. It's one we haven't documented yet." She brandished a carefully drawn picture, the childish rendering nonetheless showing keen observation of the butterfly's distinctive markings. "That's wonderful." "Princess," Robert replied, his chest tightening with the simple joy of hearing enthusiasm in his daughter's voice. We'll put it in the special book for when she arrives. The special book had been Amelia's idea, a detailed log of all the butterfly species they observed, complete with Lily's drawings and notes on behavior and plant preferences. What had begun as a distraction during difficult treatment days had evolved into a genuine scientific interest for both girls, bridging their age difference with shared purpose. Later that afternoon, as Robert drove to the bus station to collect Amelia, he reflected on the web of connections that had formed from what began as desperate last resort. His phone rang through the car's system. James with updates from New York. The board approved the sustainability initiative unanimously, his CFO reported, sounding slightly bewildered. 300 million in green technology investments over 5 years. They didn't even blink. Because the numbers make sense, Robert replied. We've run the projections 6 ways from Sunday. The ROI is solid, especially with the tax incentives. It's not just that, James said. It's you. The way you presented it connected it to our core mission. You're different, Robert. More, I don't know, centered, persuasive without being aggressive. Whatever happened in those mountains has changed you. Life happened, Robert answered simply. I finally started paying attention. After completing the business call, he pulled into the small regional bus station just as Amelia's bus arrived. She emerged with her weekend backpack, her purple hair now streaked with teal, her expression brightening when she spotted him. "Where's Mom?" she asked as she approached, the question lacking its former defensive edge. "Helping Lily with her afternoon treatment," Robert explained, taking her backpack. "She sends her apologies." Amelia shrugged with teenage nonchalance, though Robert had learned to see past the casual facade to the lingering insecurities beneath. "Whatever. I brought the field guide Lily wanted. And some new friendship bracelet threads." As they drove back toward the compound, Amelia gradually shifted from monosyllabic responses to more animated conversation, her genuine excitement about seeing Lily breaking through her practiced indifference. "How's she really doing?" she asked finally, the question revealing the depth of attachment she'd formed with Robert's daughter. "Mom says she's better, but she always says that." "She really is improving," Robert assured her. "The tumor has shrunk significantly. Her energy is better. The doctors in New York are cautiously optimistic about full recovery." Amelia absorbed this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "That's good. She deserves to be okay." After a pause, she added, "So what's going on with you and my mom?" The direct question caught Robert off guard. "What do you mean?" Amelia rolled her eyes with teenage exasperation. "Please, I'm 16, not blind. You guys do that whole not touching but totally into each other thing whenever I visit. It's both cute and gross, in case you were wondering." Robert chuckled despite himself. "That's perceptive. So?" she pressed. "Are you guys like a thing or whatever?" "It's complicated," Robert hedged. "Your mom and I care about each other very much, but there are considerations. Lily's treatment, professional boundaries, and most importantly, how changes might affect you." Amelia studied him with surprising directness. "You know what? Adults always think kids need everything to stay the same, when mostly we just need to know someone's actually thinking about what we need." The insight struck Robert silent for a moment. "And what do you need, Amelia?" She looked out the window at the passing landscape, her voice quieter when she answered. "I need my mom to be happy. She deserves that after everything. And I need to know that if I let myself care about you guys, you're not just going to disappear when Lily gets better." The vulnerability beneath the statement was palpable. "I'm not going anywhere," Robert said firmly. "Neither is Lily. You've become important to both of us, regardless of what happens between your mother and me." Amelia nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to safer topics for the remainder of the drive. But her words stayed with Robert, reinforcing the conversation he'd begun with Clara earlier. At the compound, Lily's excited greeting for Amelia transformed the teenager's careful composure into genuine warmth. The two disappeared almost immediately to the butterfly garden, Amelia exclaiming over Lily's new discovery, while the younger girl proudly displayed her drawing. Robert found Clara in the kitchen, preparing dinner with Dr. Griffin's homegrown vegetables. The domestic scene struck him with its rightness, so different from his former life of restaurants and catered meals, yet infinitely more satisfying. "Amelia mentioned you talked about us," Clara said without preamble, her directness one of the qualities he'd come to value most. Robert smiled ruefully. Teenagers, not known for their subtlety. She also said we should, and I quote, figure it out already because the weird tension is annoying. Wise. Beyond her years, Robert commented, moving closer. We were interrupted this morning before I could say something important. Clara set down the knife she was using, giving him her full attention. I'm listening. I love you, he said simply. Not because you saved my daughter, though I'll be eternally grateful for that. I love who you are. Your strength, your practicality, your unwavering commitment to what matters. I love watching you rebuild your relationship with Amelia. Love seeing how you've helped transform Lily's life and mine. Clara's composure wavered, emotion rising to the surface she typically kept carefully controlled. Robert, you don't need to say anything now, he continued gently. I know there are complexities to consider. I know we need to move carefully for Amelia and Lily's sakes. I just wanted you to know where I stand without ambiguity. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I've spent most of my adult life caring for other people's children, trying to make up for what I couldn't give my own, she said softly. I never expected to find someone who would understand both parts of me, the caregiver and the mother. I never thought I could have both my work and a family that included Amelia. And now, Robert prompted when she paused, now I'm beginning to believe it might be possible. She smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that transformed her practical features. I love you too. I think I have for months, but there were too many reasons to keep that knowledge to myself. From the doorway came a theatrical teenage sigh. Finally, Amelia stood there with Lily, both girls watching with vastly different expressions, Amelia's knowing smirk contrasting with Lily's wide-eyed delight. Are you and Clara going to get married, Daddy? Lily asked innocently, causing both adults to flush. Slow down. Princess, Robert laughed, though his eyes remained on Clara. We're just figuring things out one step at a time. But you love each other, Lily persisted with childish logic. And we're already like a family with Amelia and everything. Out of the mouths of babes, Dr. Griffin commented, appearing behind the girls with an armful of fresh herbs. Though I must insist any life changes wait until Lily's treatment cycle is complete. Emotional stability is crucial at this stage. Always the doctor, Robert said with mock exasperation. Don't worry, we're proceeding with appropriate caution. That evening, as the unconventional household gathered for dinner, Robert found himself observing each person with new awareness. Dr. Griffin, gruff but softened by months of daily interaction with a child's innocent curiosity. Amelia, her defensive edges gradually yielding to genuine connection. Lily growing stronger each day, her illness transforming from terminal sentence to profound life lesson. And Clara, whose practical strength had become the foundation upon which all their healing rested. Later, after the girls were asleep and Griffin had retired to his study, Robert and Clara sat on the porch swing beneath a canopy of stars, the future they'd begun to envision taking shape in quiet conversation. I was thinking about what you said this morning, Clara said, her practical nature already considering logistics, about finding a place nearby. There's a property about 15 minutes from here, an old farmhouse with good bones and enough land for gardens. You've been looking? Robert asked, surprised and pleased. She nodded, just exploring options. The lease on my aunt's house expires in August, which coincides with when Lily should be transitioning to maintenance protocols. Perfect timing, he observed, his arm settling comfortably around her shoulders. What does Amelia think of Vermont as a more permanent home? She pretends indifference, but I caught her researching the local high school's art program. Apparently they have an excellent photography department. Robert smiled, remembering the careful photographs of butterflies Amelia had been taking to complement Lily's drawings. And your work? I know caring for children has been your calling. Burlington Children's Hospital has a program for integrative medicine in pediatric oncology, Clara replied. Dr. Reynolds mentioned they're looking for someone with my experience to help bridge conventional and complementary approaches. You've really thought this through, Robert said, impressed but not surprised by her thoroughness. I've learned to consider all angles before making life changes, she acknowledged, especially ones that affect Amelia. They fell into comfortable silence, the night sounds of the mountains surrounding them. Above, the stars shone with a clarity impossible in New York. reminding Robert of the perspective he'd gained during these months of unexpected exile that had become transformation. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting on a porch in Vermont, planning a future with a practical nurse instead of running my company from Manhattan, he mused. You'd have fired them for incompetence, Clara suggested with a smile. Probably, he agreed, if I was so certain I knew what mattered. Success, control, building something that would outlast me. He shook his head at his former certainties. It took nearly losing Lily to understand that legacy isn't about what you build. It's about who you love and how well you love them. Clara turned to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. That understanding is why this us can work. You're not the same man who arrived here desperate and demanding. And I'm not the same woman who kept everyone at a careful distance. We've healed each other, Robert acknowledged, along with our daughters. As if summoned by the conversation, a small figure appeared in the doorway, Lily in her pajamas,